Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. My name's Chris, and tonight I checked out the new Netflix movie Fear Street Part 1, directed by one Leigh Janiak. She did the Honeymoon movie from a few years ago that I kind of liked, and this is based on those RL Stine novels. So this movie's about a bunch of teenagers in the 90s in this town called Shadyside where a bunch of murders are happening, and it involves the supernatural witch creature, and yeah, some hijinks ensue. I never read the Fear Street books. I did read the Goosebumps books when I was growing up, but I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s, but I think I was maybe just a little too old for the Fear Street books at the time or something like that. So I don't have any nostalgia or anything for the Fear Street series, but I certainly have nostalgia for the time period. So this is a pretty fun movie, pretty mindless and very predictable, but it has enough of a budget and the pacing is so breakneck that it's hard to not be entertained. So when this movie started, it was a little bit all over the place for me, and it took a little bit for me to settle into the pacing that's going on here. It starts out with this woman who I recognize from Stranger Things. It does look way more 80s to me than 90s, and we can get into some of that. But it starts blasting Nine Inch Nails music and then cutting to like orchestral music, and you have this opening scene that parallels the intro kill from Scream with Drew Barrymore, and it's just a lot going on. It's very quick, and its tone was all over the place. But then after, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes, I kind of just got settled into this frenetic pacing of this movie. And like, I'm not underplaying it. Like every 10 seconds, there is some sort of horror hit sound, switch to a new like song from the 90s or something happening. Like this movie is made for people who have very little attention span or something. It's so frenetic. So when I was eventually able to settle into the pacing of this movie, I got on board with it. I really like the characters in this movie. They're all pretty endearing and likable. There's some humor sprinkled throughout that sometimes hits, sometimes doesn't, but for the most part I like the tone with the characters. But there is a level of pandering here that just didn't work for me. There is just like a 90s reference every 10 seconds in this movie. Whether it's like we're constantly switching between licensed songs or references to movies or things going on in the 90s, it's just ridiculous, and it starts to feel like pandering more than authentic. This movie looks to me way more like an 80s movie or like a throwback style Stranger Things type thing than the 90s time period at all. Like I said, I grew up in the 90s, so I don't know. I can go back and watch movies made from the 90s and obviously get very nostalgic. This is obviously trying to harken back to that time, but it just doesn't look like it at all to me. And while you playing like White Zombie and some Iron Maiden songs and shit like that, some Soundgarden, like I liked all that stuff, but it didn't make it feel 90s to me. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but all the lighting is like oversaturated with its reds and blues and purples, kind of like a Stranger Things 80s vibe. Like when I think of the 90s movies that it's trying to play homage to, like Scream, or I Know What You Did Last Summer, or Urban Legend, those kind of things, I don't remember them being these like bombastic, oversaturated, overlit type things. So visually, it just really didn't pull me into that aesthetic. Now, story-wise, with your teenage characters being stalked, yeah, that's very 90s slashery, I guess. I wasn't a big fan of those kind of movies at the time either. I always felt like those 90s slasher movies felt a little neutered. They were more mainstream. The kill sequences were never that fantastic or anything. So I was never a huge fan of those kind of movies. And this is obviously trying to stick more to those kind of things, so maybe that's why it doesn't completely work for me. That being said, I still kind of had fun with this thing. I think it's the characters. There's a bit of a coming-of-age kind of story going on here, and the emotional heart of the movie with the two young women I thought worked for the most part, and I thought it was endearing and compelling. I liked their relationship and the problems they were going through personally. The villains in the movie are your kind of stereotypical horror archetypes. You have the Scream Ghostface kind of killer. You have a guy who kind of looks like from the town that dreaded sundown. And then you have like this just like stereotypical witch lady type thing. But they work, they're menacing when they're portrayed. And near the end of the movie, there is a few fun kill sequences, namely one that's really pretty good and really brutal. So it is a very predictable movie. Nothing really new here. It's got a decent budget because of Netflix. It looks great. The acting is good. The music is relentless, and The fan service is a little much for me, but overall, I had a fun time with it. It's something you can put on. It's kind of mindless entertainment, but there's enough here that I think enjoy. It's not blowing me away in any way. I wish I felt the nostalgia I think this movie's trying to get me to feel. It just didn't work for me, but maybe it works for you. So let me know down below what you thought of Fear Street, and I will catch you here next time, guys. Goodbye.